Right, story time. In 1980, the BBC established its own charity, Children in Need, to raise money for projects and for other charities that serve the well-being of children in the UK. And every year since then, they have devoted an evening's programming in November to a telethon. I will show you a clip from the 9th BBC Children in Need telethon, which took place on the 18th of November 1988. This clip is from early in the evening, about 7:50 p.m. Because the 1988 Miss World contest had just taken place the previous night at the Albert Hall, Terry Wogan and Joanna Lumley, the hosts, have just interviewed its winner, Linda Pietersdottir, here, and then this happened.
The first Miss World contest was held in 1912. Now, in those days, the contestants had to swim, row, and sing. So we now please the very first Miss World, Alice Hyde.
And this is all transcribed on your handout.
Alice, you're welcome. Gosh, 1912, how old are you?
94, soon 94.
Alice, you saw the show. I mean, did you approve of the winner? Did you, well,
Today,
yeah.
I certainly did.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, we all did. All the people all around me, they said it was a lovely girl.
Do you still approve of the contest? Do you think?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
I do approve of it very much. I think anything beautiful should be applauded and recognised. I really do.
Yeah. So what did you have to do to win it in 1912?
Well, it was a little bit more difficult.
Let me say.
I had to ride, and I could ride. I used to ride up on its neck like a jockey, and that was unusual in those days for me, for a lady.
Yes.
And I could drive a car and do all sorts of things.
Did you have to swim?
Swim and dive. I dived to my sorrow because in diving I didn't look first of all how deep the water was. And of course I dived from the ceiling. And I'm not this ceiling. Quite so high.
I may do that before the evening is over. It's too shallow, was
Then
it?
it was too shallow.
Is that why you're so small?
Yes.
Well, no, I don't mean that, but you were always a petite Miss World, weren't you? You were 5'3" or 4 when you won it? Yes.
I forgot you must be nearly half in.
Oh, certainly, I think it's terribly important. But you do look wonderful. And do you do much? What do you do to keep fit?
Well, I do exercises. I can still do press-ups. And, you know, ordinary. I'm just ordinary.
You certainly are not. You're 94. I mean, I'm 50 and I can't do press-ups. Well, I can do about one. How many do you do?
4. 3 or 4.
3 or 4 more than I can. As I say, I mean, is there any great difference in your weight now between the time you... There isn't?
No, I'm exactly 7 stones, 5... What are they? Pounds?
No, we'll be asking you how to reduce that to kilos in a moment. So, I mean, what about winning? Did you win much money?
Well, not as you do these days, because it was all different. But it was £250, and that was a lot to me in those days. Yes.
So what did you do with your money?
Oh. Well, one thing, it led me to a new husband.
Yes, you don't.
Yes, it must have been. It was a very, very lovely man, a nice man, and I loved him very much. He loved me. And
In those days, did people disapprove of contests like that?
I'm afraid they did, my parents included. Yes.
Did you have to change your name or what to take part?
No, my real name is Lavender Lee. That's my name, and I entered as Lavender Lee, and that's it.
It's very good to have you here, and it's very nice to have with you.
Okay, just about to end. It's time for a pretzi. Okay. Okay, it always takes a moment for the images to load up on Prezi, they will do so. Okay, so here we have Alice Hyde providing some oral history with 4 main pieces of information. So 1, the first Miss World contest took place in 1912. 2, Alice Hyde won the first Miss World contest. And 3, Alice won a prize of £250 in the contest. And 4, Alice's real name is Lavender Lee. Now, there is just one problem with this piece of storytelling, which is that it is complete nonsense. All 4 of these claims are wrong. First, the Miss World contest was actually first held on the 27th of July 1951 as part of the Festival of Britain. The contest's organiser, Eric Morley, initially called it the Miss Festival of Britain contest and the Festival of Britain Bikini contest, but when the contest started to attract entrants from outside the British Isles, the press started calling it the Miss World contest. This is the Daily Mirror calling it the Miss World contest on the day of the contest itself. And reportedly by the night of the contest, Morley was calling it the Miss World contest, and he adopted it as the contest's official name from 1952 onwards. So Terry Wogan and Alice Hyde were 39 years too early here with their date of 1912. Now, second and third, Alice did not win the first Miss World contest. The winner of the 1951 contest was a 22-year-old Swedish model called Kerstin Harkinson. While Alice would have just turned 57 that year, Alice didn't have anything to do with the 1951 contest. Even if she had applied, ageism would have kept the organisers from considering this 57-year-old. And fourth, Alice's real name was not Lavender Lee. Alice's real name was actually Alice Hyde. This is her birth certificate. She was born Alice Lee, daughter of Sophia Lee and George Lee, on the 18th of July 1894, and she took the surname Hyde when she married one Charles Edwin Hyde in June 1921. So up to 1921, her real name was Alice Lee, and after 1921, her real name was Alice Hyde, and her real name was never Lavender Lee. Now, Alice was referring to something that happened in the 1910s, but of course this was 70 years before, plenty of time for her to misremember. We all misremember a lot more than we think we do. I have also spoken with one of Alice's grandchildren, an archaeologist called Marie-Claire Rackham-Mann, who speculates that Alice was already suffering from dementia by 1988. It is normal for anyone aged 94 to have at least some dementia. But if we look at what did actually happen to Alice in the 1910s, as well as in the decade before the 1988 telethon, we can see that most of Alice's falsehoods were actually deliberate lies, the result of some rather tragic circumstances. So back we go, not to 1912, but to 1918. This is from the 24th of August 1918 issue of the UK film fan magazine Pictures and Picturegoer. This is the magazine launching a competition to find the Pictures Girl. It's a star search competition, a talent contest, to create a new film star. And these are the entry requirements. Notice here that entrants must be, number 3, 5 to 25 years old, number 4, quote, possessed of good looks, unquote, and 5, have no previous experience of professional film or stage acting. The competition was organised between the magazine, Pictures and Picturegoer, and the production company Broadwest, and the prize was, quote, a part in support of the leading lady and on a full salary basis in a forthcoming Broadwest photo play, and if her anticipated success deserves it, a contract for future work in the same company will follow, unquote. To enter, a woman should send in this coupon along with a photograph on the back of which she should write her name, address, age, complexion, hair colour, eye colour, height, and measurements. Entries closed on the 7th of October 1918. The magazine claimed that about 8,000 women entered. Their staff produced a long list of 300 women, and here's their artist's fanciful drawing of them doing this long listing, from which Broadwest manager chose a short list of 14 women, who in January 1919 went to the Broadwest studio in Walthamstow for screen tests, and then in February 1919, a final shortlist of 3 women returned to Walthamstow for an even more demanding screen test, and then in their 1st of March 1919 issue, the magazine briefly announced that the Pictures Girl was, quote, Miss Alice Lavender Lee of Mexborough, unquote, and then the next week they devoted a full-page article to the winner, and this is our Alice. Now notice that they are calling her in the caption for the photograph there, Lavender Lee. The coverage in the magazine indicates that Alice had adopted this pseudonym Lavender during the competition only after she was shortlisted. It shows understanding of the usefulness of repetition and variation in film star names like Florence Lawrence. And for the next few months, the magazine devoted a lot of attention to Alice, always calling her Lavender Lee. These bits of publicity, for example, cover Alice attending a fancy dress ball for the film trade on the 9th of May 1919 in the company of the magazine's staff. Lee is the one dressed as a ballerina, wearing headgear bearing the name The Pictures Girl. She is Lavender Lee in the caption for the postcard, and she is Lavender Lee in the caption for the drawing. Now, by using her pseudonym, the staff of the magazine were helping, at least trying to help Alice, establish a public profile. But if you are wondering why you haven't heard of Lavender Lee, the silent film star, before, that's because apart from this publicity as the Pictures Girl in the magazine, Alice had nothing further to do with the film industry, ever. Between March and July 1919, various mentions in the magazine and in the film trade press imply that Alice moved to London, reported for work at Broadwest's Walthamstow studio, started rehearsing for the supporting role that was her prize, but then in July 1919, all of these sources just abruptly stopped talking about her. Several mentions in the trade press suggest that the specific film in which Broadwest planned to cast her was A Great Coup, an adaptation of a 1910 novel by Nat Gould, which Broadwest ultimately made and released in June 1920. And though the film hasn't survived, a press book and some stills have, along with reviews in the trade press and fan magazines. None of the stills show Alice, none of the copy about the film mentions her. That is Poppy Wyndham. Alice's name does not appear in contemporary sources in connection with any films ever. Alice's entry on IMDb, for example, is incorrect. The reason why Alice did not get the supporting role that was her prize, it may have been rather mundane. Perhaps she signed a contract in which even this supporting role was conditional on Walter West approving of her acting skills first, and he didn't approve. Or perhaps it was more sinister. Alice's granddaughter Marie Claire speculates that Alice may have refused to provide sexual services to the staff of Broadwest, or something that Alice had concealed may have come to light. For example, in 1919, Alice was an unmarried mother. She'd had a daughter named Sheila in early 1917. If the staff at Broadwest found out about this, though the rules of the contest did not forbid it, they would have probably sent her home, even if it put them in breach of contract. And notice that throughout this process, I have never mentioned any prize money. The competition had no prize money, and the salary for the supporting role in one film would not have been £250. We can only speculate about Broadwest compensating Alice for breach of contract. She never told her family what happened. So by 1920, something has happened to Alice that she doesn't want people to know about. This is her being interviewed by the Yorkshire Telegraph and Star in June 1920. Quote, Miss Lavender Lee of Mexborough, who was introduced to the film world some time ago when she won the All England Broadwest Beauty Competition, is shortly to be married. I'll skip a sentence. Since she proceeded to London last year, Miss Lee has been engaged almost continuously in film work and has fulfilled many contracts. Unquote. This is partly untrue. Alice had not fulfilled any contracts with any film studio. Here, what she's doing to this journalist is framing the act of leaving the film industry, something she had been forced to do, as her own decision. And notice this phrase here, the All England Broadwest Beauty Competition, which was probably what Alice called it to this journalist. The original competition was part beauty contest, but by styling it here as entirely a beauty contest, Alice described a situation where just by winning, she had succeeded, which is not the case with a talent contest, where winners have to then go on to establish a career, something we widely see winners of such contests finding impossible. So even in 1920, Alice is already fabricating her history, not misremembering, and I initially thought that by 1988, Alice's fabricating had simply grown to Miss World proportions, but it seems not, because that lie came from elsewhere. Skipping forward to 1978, Alice is 84, and she's living in, this is the year I was born, she's living in Penzance in Cornwall. This is an article about Alice in the Cornish newspaper The West Briton in September 1978. Quote, out of 8,000 contestants, a petite, vivacious girl from Yorkshire with tumbling brown ringlets was selected in a film magazine's contest to become something very like the first ever Miss World, unquote. Now, this is already untrue. The Pictures Girl competition wasn't a beauty contest, it wasn't an international beauty contest like the Miss World contest, and it wasn't even the first national beauty contest in the UK. That had taken place in late 1907 and early 1908, when the Daily Mirror ran a photographic beauty contest open to entrants from anywhere in the UK. It was won by Ivy Close in March 1908. But you can see where this is going, can't you? Right. So, 1988. Skip forward 10 years, Alice has just turned 94. The story in the West Britain has circulated around various other newspapers and finally made its way to the Daily Mail. At the time, the third highest circulating national newspaper in the country, and that casual Miss World simile in the West Britain has got out of hand, because here, in its 25th of July 1988 issue, the Daily Mail contributor Aubrey Chalmers is claiming that Alice won the first Miss World contest that we have at the top there. Chalmers gets a few details right, including that the competition was run by a film fan magazine and that Alice used the pseudonym Lavender, that it's not her real name. But not only is Chalmers making Alice the first Miss World erroneously and 39 years too early, he even gets the date of the Pictures Girl contest 7 years too early at 1912 and adds the invented prize money. This article is about 50% made up. And this specific article, published about 4 months before the Children in Need's telethon, is clearly the reason why Alice ended up on the sofa next to Linda Pietersdottir. For example, that odd question that Terry Wogan asked Alice about her weight was designed to prompt Alice to provide this information from the Daily Mail article, that she was light at the time and is still light now. Now remember that the BBC's producers had just arranged for Linda Pietersdottir to appear on the show. That would have involved contacting the organisers of the Miss World contest. Eric Morley was still alive and his wife Julia Morley was still running the contest. The BBC could have just asked either of them about the first Miss World contest and its winner and its prize. But they didn't bother, because they just trusted that this journalist had done his job. So imagine the BBC inviting a 94-year-old Alice to maybe appear on the Children in Need telethon, probably interviewing her, definitely involving her in some kind of rehearsal, and at some point in this process, Alice realises that she has a choice. Either correct Aubrey Chalmers' mistakes before the telethon, so that she humiliates a national newspaper journalist to an audience of BBC staff, or correct Aubrey Chalmers' mistakes on national television, so that she humiliates him in front of millions of viewers, or endure the absurd experience of being asked questions that prompt her to tell what she knows are lies, and tell those lies on national television. And in this position of fear, of course she went for the third of these options, only managing to partly rein in one of the mistakes in the Daily Mail article, where she says that instead of the prize money being £500, that she gives the more modest figure of £250, which is closer to the truth, which is no money at all. Alice, interestingly, even lied on the spot to save face for Terry Wogan. In the Daily Mail article, Aubrey Chalmers had accurately stated that Alice Hyde was her real name and that the name Lavender Lane was a pseudonym, and so on the sofa, Terry asked Alice about that. But because someone at the BBC has misunderstood the situation, that question goes, quote, "Did you have to change your name to take part?" unquote. And Alice replies with no, because the correct answer is that she didn't have to change her name to take part. The correct answer is that she used the pseudonym Lavender Lee voluntarily and without concealing her real name. The magazine said her name's Alice, and that she only did this after she entered the competition. But then she realises that Terry's question was supposed to get her to tell everyone about this pseudonym, and so having said no to whether she had to change her name to enter, she now has to come up with another lie to still mention having two names, while also avoiding humiliating Terry Wogan, which is why she tells the first lie here that Lavender Lee is her real name and that Alice Hyde is a pseudonym. Now, when we imagine someone lying, we tend to think of them lying for their own gain. But when people lie, they usually do it because they think it will prevent worse suffering. Here, the worst suffering that Alice is avoiding is being responsible for humiliating a national newspaper journalist and a national TV presenter on national television. Alice's oral account tells us nothing about media history. Her appearance on the telethon doesn't even tell us to be cautious about media history. Only the roughly accurate account of certain events in Alice's life that I have assembled tells us that, and to take exactly the amount of credit that is due to me, that took me more than 100 hours of work in archives across about a 12-year stretch, and for that, you are welcome.